You are listening to Verba Minute, where words do remain.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast series Right the Wrongs. Every Wednesday and Saturday, Right the Wrongs raises public awareness on pressing human rights issues and creates an incubator of activism. Today we will talk about the important racial issues in America. I am Louise.
And I am Brennan. Yesterday, the 29th of March, the prosecution of George Floyd's killer, Derek Chauvin, began in America, sparking off another round of debate on this very controversial issue which has rocked the nation in the past. And this is especially important why today we continue to need to talk about these very important issues regarding race and the equality of people.
Firstly, before going deeper into the modern racial issues in America, we should have a little historical context. Therefore, why is race such an important issue in America?
Well, race is an important issue in America today, especially as compared with other countries in Europe, primarily due to its history. As we all know, since the foundation of the United States of America in 1776, slavery, primarily of Africans and African Americans, was legal up until the 13th Amendment in 1865. Even after the abolishment of slavery, the Jim Crow laws, enacted in the late 19th and early 20th century, legalized racial segregation in all public facilities with the principle of separate but equal. For instance, in buses, black and white people could not sit together and each had their own compartments. Anti-Asian sentiment existed since the Yellow Peril, which was the fear that East Asians would take over the world and be a threat to the Western world. However, it peaked during the Second World War with the establishment of American concentration camps that would incarcerate Japanese. Therefore, race has always been an issue in America, and it explains why it's important today as well.
So, does this historical background affect the well-being of the American society today?
Indeed it does. In 2019, there were 3,963 hate crimes linked to race, ethnicity, ancestry, or other types of racial bias. As we can see, tensions linked to race are still rampant in American society.
What are some of today's concrete examples of these crimes?
Well, there are almost periodic incidents and protests against them in America. Right now, the killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd sparked wider protests as well as debate in American society. But this question is not new. In 2016, it was Charlotte and Milwaukee. A year before, Charleston, Baltimore, or Ferguson. It was a structural issue. Your racial profile affects your chance of being incarcerated, your income, and even the likelihood of police brutality.
How is the situation of crimes against Asians nowadays in America?
Well, the situation is actually really bad. Indeed, since the COVID-19 pandemic was reported in China, there was an increase in xenophobia, racism, and discrimination against people of Asian descent around the world, and especially in America. At the beginning of the pandemic, there were different incidents of racism against Asian Americans, going from changing streets when seeing an Asian person of fear of COVID, to incidents of racial slurs and violent attacks. Most recently, there was a spike in attacks against Asian Americans. For instance, in Atlanta, where on March 16, 2021, a series of mass shootings occurred in different spas and massage parlors, killing 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian women. The shooter has not been charged with a hate crime since he said he was motivated by his sex addiction, but experts say that due to the history of fetishization of Asian women in American society, race could have played an important role here as well.
But to develop on your last point with fetishization of Asian women, do you think that stereotypes play a role in the current Asian issues?
I definitely think that. Indeed, a current stereotype is that black people are aggressive, therefore police officers see them as a threat, even when they are not causing harm, leading to them using extreme violence on them. Nowadays, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Asian people are seen as being responsible for the virus, and this stereotype is really hurtful and dangerous. Henceforth, it is important to stand against those stereotypes at all costs.
And what was the reaction from the political elites as well as the wider society?
President Biden condemned hate against Asian Americans, which happened in light of the recent shootings that were targeting this community. The same message was echoed by Kamala Harris. However, none of them laid a vision on how to combat this trend. Change in rhetoric also has an impact because words do matter, but it may not be enough. And after these attacks, there was also a fierce pushback from the American public, Prior to that, this issue was mostly ignored despite the skyrocketing numbers of attacks on Asians. That is in stark contrast to the Trump administration, which ignored these issues completely, and Trump himself has used a rhetoric that ignited hate, such as referring to COVID-19 as the Chinese virus or Kung Flu. This anti-Chinese sentiment, with some saying that the whole Chinese society and all of Chinese people are a threat to America, feeds broader anti-Asian views.
So, what should we do if we want to fight against race-related hate?
In my view, if our fight is a reaction to events that happen, we have already lost. The best way in combating something is almost always prevention. You can do that by many different means, but central to all of them is the change of culture around race issues, and by that I mean refraining from using phrases and ideas that, even if not directly, might ignite hate, but also to trying to teach and promote more openness, educating the population, and especially those who are susceptible about the problems that minorities face in this society. But ultimately, violence and hate cannot be suppressed by force or further violence. What we need mostly is dialogue, compassion, and understanding.
That's the end of today's episode on racial issues in America. Feel free to engage with us on Facebook and Instagram and join us for further discussion on our Telegram group, or leave us a comment at theverbamanentpodcast@gmail.com. This episode was written by Jan and Zineb, recorded by Louise and Brennan, and produced by Louise, and brought to you by Right the Wrongs under Verbamanent. The next episode of Right the Wrongs will air on Saturday. You can find the program wherever you find your podcasts, bringing you detailed updates on pressing human rights issues. Till next time, take care!